Welcome back to Obsessed by Everything Bravo. My name is Meredith, and I am your host on our journey through the Real Housewives, except for this week and next week, we are not talking about the Real Housewives. We are taking our first detour off of the Real Housewives to a different type of Bravo content. This week and next week, we're going to be talking about the Shahs of Sunset. Shahs of Sunset Season 1. And I cannot believe that this is our first exit off of the Housewives ramp, off of the Housewives highway. Our first stop. It is snowing so hard outside of my window right now. It's kind of funny. Yes, so weirdly, Shahs of Sunset. And so my criteria for talking about stuff is if it has multiple seasons. And so while Bravo has lots of programming, they don't necessarily have lots of seasons that I can talk about or that make such an impact on the whole Bravo as a whole. Shaw's does. I mean, we currently have a new different type of Shaw's. It's the Valley Persian style, but also Reza and MJ were all on Traders as well. So these people are in our Bravo universe. They're just circling around, right? And so it's important to include them, unlike certain other shows that I will probably cover at some point. It will just be in a subscription based. So hold on, I have my list here. There's a whole bunch of shows that I really loved. Princess's Long Island, a great one. Some of the real estate shows I don't really care about. Flipping Out, I will not, because I do not like Jeff Lewis and I just don't want to really take him on. Now, Rachel Zoe will be interesting because Rachel Zoe is now currently a housewife. So that's kind of a nice little crossover. Here we go. NYC Prep. That was good. Kel on Earth. I know I want to talk about Kel on Earth. A lot of the housewife spinoffs, of course, we'll be talking about. Most Eligible Dallas. And there's also another one that she did. We'll talk about that. Gallery Girls. I didn't actually watch Gallery Girls. Princess's Long Island. The People's Couch. Probably won't be talking about that, but I do love that. Blood, Sweat, and Heels. That was one that I really loved. Ladies of London. We're going to be covering that. I love Ladies of London. Some of these I never have heard of, like Mother Funders. I think it was people who do charities. I'm not, but again, we can cover this. There's like tons and tons and tons and tons of content. It's just like if you've got one or two seasons, I just really don't want to like take our regular podcast time to talk about that. They're just going to be like spinoffs. But Shahs of Sunset, like 11 seasons. Hold on, let me 9 seasons, excuse me. And then now we have this new thing. So it is something that we will be covering. So today we're going to be talking about season 1, episode 1. It is entitled Image is Everything. Now, one thing about me is I am a curious person. I'm a curious person, and I like to be well informed. Now, one thing I'm learning about myself is recently I had a coworker a couple of weekends ago text me and she's like, "What's going on with Venezuela?" And I was like, "I don't know." What is going on with Venezuela? And that was when, my government had went in and kidnapped the government leader of Venezuela. I just hadn't been online to like know about it. It was just like funny to me that she's like, this girl I work with is texting me to ask me about it. And so I looked online and then I sent her some links. And then it just reminded me of also several years ago, somebody sat me down at work and they were like, what's going on with Gaza and Israel? And so I remember I made a picture, a drawing. So apparently I am the geopolitical expert at my job that they text me. But the Shahs of Sunset, they talk about the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Now, I love an event that happened prior to my birth. But I was really not well versed on what had happened. And because it had happened prior to my birth, I didn't like live through it. And also the way that the Shahs talk about it was because they were also children. They probably don't have that much information about it. It's just like a thing that happened. But I did do a little bit of research, so I'm going to explain a little bit of what I know. But the opening, and very similar to the Housewives, whenever they have a new Housewives opening, we got it with Jersey, we got it with Miami, we got it with Beverly Hills, we got it with DC. They have like each one of the cast members has like a little piece of a monologue, and they tell a little bit of a story about where they live and, you know, that kind of thing. And they do this on Shahs of Sunset as well. Okay. So they're all opening up, and they're talking about the Iranian Revolution, which is why, of course, why I bring this up, and how in 1979, most of their families had fled Iran, and that basically when they lived there, they all lived relatively middle class or upper class lifestyles. But during the revolution, they had to essentially flee. They were refugees. Most of them had nothing but a suitcase, no money, no nothing. And they all ended up in LA. And essentially, LA became, and this is how a lot of immigrant populations do it, you go to where already have an established community, because you might say, well, my uncle moved there 20 years ago, or I have a friend of my cousin lives there, and it's just like a place where you can go and settle, and there's already a community. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? Well, their community just happened to be in LA. Okay. And so that's where a lot of them settled. And I think at one point, Asa says that LA has the largest community of Persians outside of Iran. So they all went to LA, and basically in the Persian culture. So Persian is Iran. This is what I found in my research, that the country used to be called Persia. And so Persian is sort of like an equal name. I don't know what the word is, but interchangeable name for Iran. Modern day is Iran, but they would all say Persian, and like their culture is Persian. Also, the majority speak Farsi. Oh, sorry, not Arabic. So it's a Muslim country now, but we need to think about. We're thinking about prior to 1979, and same thing with Gaza. I feel like there's a lot of similarities in because of its being sort of like the Middle East is the mesh of a lot of different religions, and like that's where Jesus was from. Well, that's also where Islam is from, also where Judaism. So there's like a mix of a lot of those religions, and Iran at that time was the same way. Now, the research that I have done is like the Muslim religious leaders, or sort of like controlling the country. So I would assume that people that were in other religions maybe had fled. I know that the Shahs do make up. There are Jewish Shahs there. The Shahs, I'm going to refer to the cast members as the Shahs, where I would normally say like housewives. We're not talking about housewives. We're talking about the Shahs. But there are Jewish and there are Muslim. I don't know if there's Christian. It's just maybe, I'm sure that there are, but not on the show. Okay. Okay. And so now they all went to Beverly Hills High School. And I love that they're like, we went to Beverly Hills High School. It's giving very much 90210. Now, on 90210, I don't think was there Shahs there? I don't know. In the background. And obviously, that's a TV show, but they're very proud of that. And then they talk about how in their culture, their Persian culture, they love gold, they love opulence, and there's a lot of pressure to have success, money, and to get married and have babies. And I'm like, that's kind of the pressure of all cultures, right? Is to get married and have babies. Maybe not so much like the money, but everybody's like, when are you gonna get married and have babies? I feel like that's kind of universal when you're like in your 20s. Okay, so the little bit that I know about the Russian, or not the Russian, the Iranian Revolution. So, um, you have to go back farther than 1979, but essentially, we're post World War II. Long story short is they find a lot of oil because, of course, we also have the Cold War, and there was like a lot of grabbing, like, by the imperialism. So there was like a lot of like England, United States, Russia. They're all trying to like grab on to these countries in the Cold War, but also because of oil, and that is the cause of a lot of things that happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Was because of all of this imperialism trying to grab up these countries to during the Cold War, and that happened in Asia as well. Like that was what the Korean War, the Vietnam War, but essentially America and England were in there dicking around, creating a lot of turmoil, removing governments, removing democratically elected governments, putting in their own people. That essentially led to a lot. There was a lot of good things that happened economically, but then there was a lot of bad things that happened economically. But I want you to think of the 1960s and 70s Iran as just being very westernized. A lot of people didn't like that, but they would walk around, women in like mini skirts. People were educated, women were allowed to vote. There was like a lot of rights, very, very much what we would recognize in our society. Some people didn't like that, because there was like American, ideas were like pushed down their throats. And I can see that, as an American, that would be difficult for people who grew up in other cultures, just to be constantly to be like, America's the best, and everything about America is great, and blah blah blah. When obviously that's not the case, very clearly. And then there would be a lot of economical unrest, and all of these things that happened over several decades was just like this perfect soup for there to be an uprising, because people were upset about this, that, or the other. And then some of the things that they were upset about would be a valid, right? Like there's not enough jobs, and maybe people are abusing systems and abusing power. But what happened was, with this revolution and all this stuff that happened, it created this scenario where very, I would say, like right wing religious people were able to take control of the government and kind of puppet master. Even though there is like elected officials, those people are controlled by very extreme Muslim governments. And that is kind of like what we are seeing today. So I know that in the news, and I'm not really versed on what's going on there now. Look, I can only do so much research. But I know that there was like protest maybe in the past couple of weeks, and the government murdered like what I heard was like 500 protesters, and then jailed several thousand. What's interesting about what I'm learning about the Iranian Revolution, like in the 70s, it's very similar to the things that are happening in America now, which is kind of scary, because I do feel like right now there's a lot of like right wing Christian nationalists who are like puppet mastering our government, because there's a lot of dismantling of the protections in our federal government, and then the people who are running it don't have a clue. They're totally unqualified. They're just sycophants that were appointed. And we're really, really, really in a weird area where I can definitely see something like that. I can see in the next 5 years not being able to leave the house without a man present. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I can see that for myself. And I think that's why, when a lot of women who kind of like know what's up woke up the day after election day and were insanely depressed, because this kind of shit has happened before. The other thing that just makes me so sad is when you start to realize that a lot of the bad things that happen around the world happen because of things that my own government did. Of course, this happened decades before I was born, right? But it's like, when is that coming? When are we going to have to pay for that? And I think right now, it's like, why am I and my child having to pay for the sins of my grandfathers? Not my personal grandfather, you know what I'm saying? But then it goes back even farther to, whatever. I can't get on this soapbox, but it's like America did so much damage in the 50s and 60s trying to fight communism. It's honestly mind-blowing. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the Shahs of Sunset. So that's just an explanation of what happened. So all of our Shahs with their families, either they were born or they weren't. A lot of them were, I doubt Gigi was born because I feel like she's younger than me, but her, Reza was alive and remembers. Asa was alive and remembers. They all had to flee and they ended up in LA. Okay. So that is the premise, but I just thought it would be nice to have like a little bit of a history lesson. Sad. And also, I think relevant to today, right? So that's the opening. They tell us a little bit about how they got there. Now we open up to MJ. So we have several characters. We're going to be meeting them. So we have MJ and we have Reza and we have Gigi. Now those three are currently on the new Shaw show. We also will have Asa, who is a character, and then we have a guy named Mike. And then we have a guy named Sammy. Now, Sammy is a one-hit wonder. He's not doing that much. Mike is what I think is the reason that the Shahs were canceled in the first place. And I'm not going to be able to not let my bias come through on Mike because he was arrested. I don't know if he served jail time, but I know he was arrested on domestic violence charges. So I feel like, just coming from Beverly Hills season 2 right into this is something to think about. So I'm not going to be nice to Mike. I don't give a fuck about Mike. He's a loser. And hindsight is amazing because it's like you can like just watching it, and I will be honest, I of course have watched Shahs of Sunset, and I'm not going to say that I've watched every episode, but I've never rewatched. Like I've watched it, and maybe if it was on in the background, like back in the day, it was on and I watched extra, but I have never done a rewatch. Whereas like with Housewives, I watched it and then I've at least done one rewatch of every show. You know what I'm saying? With Shahs, I never did. So being able to just have like fresh eyes on this and like look at all of this, but also with what I know is going to be interesting and be able to pick things out, but I'm not going to be able to pick out everything. Right. So this first episode, we're just like meeting our people, right? So MJ is, she's getting a stroller out of her car. And the stroller is for her 2 dogs, Pablo and Julio. And she said when Persian girls find out that she's not interested in getting married, she's dismissed, which seems weird to me because I'd be like, okay, well, this woman's not going to be into my man. So that would be like more friendly. I don't know. She's dropping her 2 dogs off at daycare and she puts them in this little room and she's like, oh, can you turn on Animal Planet? Which is like, your dogs watch TV? I don't know. My dog does not watch TV. And she says that her parents were very successful, and growing up she had 3 homes and she was an only child, so she was very spoiled. So now we go over to meet Reza. Now what's what's funny about Reza is, I mean, he's arguably the star of this show. He says that he's finer than any other Persian man, and he's like listing all this stuff off, and he goes, "And I'm humble," and it's a joke, like it's a tongue-in-cheek joke. You cannot take most of what Reza says at all seriously. He's like he's like the archetype for the gay guy who's best friends with women and just jokes around about everything. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he's like that. So he's a real estate agent, and him and MJ is also a real estate agent. A lot of real estate. These people are doing. That's what their jobs are, is a lot of real estate. MJ works in his office. They share an office. They went to high school together, and have been best friends since high school. And she says that she was the first person he came out to as gay. Now, what's interesting is to have a Persian gay man, because I think at one point Sammy mentions, if we still lived in Iran, Reza would be murdered for being gay, which I think is kind of something that we need to remember. MJ says he wasn't always this fabulous. He used to have Coke bottle glasses and was fat. Okay, now we go to a shooting range. Ugh. Least favorite thing of anything, a shooting range. Blech. And so now we meet Gigi and Mike. Gigi is short for Golnessa. Everybody just calls her Gigi. So Mike says he used to date Gigi's older sister, Layla. We will meet Layla at some point. Gigi and Layla don't have a great relationship. And Gigi tells us she is obsessed with cars, guns, and knives. And yes, this woman has a knife. She's actually a little scary sometimes. I will be honest with you. And she grew up with guns because her parents owned a large ranch. So this is why they're at the shooting range. They're going to shoot guns. Mike says, no. Gigi grew up in the whitest neighborhood in California. She's more of a princess than a badass. And so Gigi lets us know that even though she's like 30 years old, her dad does all her bill keeping and bill paying. And she's looking for a spouse that can keep up with her lifestyle. So basically pay for her lifestyle. Mike loves flirting with women and knowing that he's wanted. And Gigi loves attention, so she flirts back. So they're flirting while they're shooting guns. Even so much so that the attendant asks how long that they've been dating. And they're like, we're not dating. And it's like, okay, well, you're acting like it. Gigi says that her parents want her to marry a Persian boy, but Persian boys always want someone to cook for them and clean up after them. And she would never do that for anyone. So what I need to impart on you is that Gigi is 30 years old. She does not have a job. Her parents pay for everything. Okay. So your parents pay for everything, but you don't cook and clean. I don't know what you think is the benefit of getting married. Like, what? I'm not trying to be bitchy, but it's like, what's the benefit for your future husband to marry you? There is none. So Mike tells us that he's an alpha male and he's good at everything that he does. And he works in commercial real estate, but he wants everyone to speak well of him. Well, that ship sailed, babe. I'm not going to say any good words about you. Now we meet Asa, that's ASA. Now, Asa is a different character. She's an artist, and she says her work is about her life, being a Muslim woman in America. She does painting, photography, and music. So we meet her, and she is at the recording studio, and she is working on a song called Tehrangeles. So it's like Tehran and Los Angeles combined. She says because LA has the largest population of Persians outside of Iran. She says in Iran, she had a very easy life. They had money and like a very nice lifestyle, but they fled the revolution and lost everything. They left with one suitcase each. And when they got to America, they lived in the ghettos and hood of LA. And she was like in one bedroom, like rent controlled apartments. She has not been back to Iran since she was 7. And she says that makes her emotionally homeless. And that is just the refugee experience. Which that's interesting. And, this is so interesting. Such an interesting perspective. in 2011 when this was shot compared to 2026 where we have immigrants being like persecuted. And it's just such an interesting picture because Asa very much identifies as a refugee. That's like her, that's how she identifies. That's what she makes her art about. And being like a Muslim refugee after like September 11th and all this stuff, such an interesting experience. I'd love to just like sit down and have a conversation about all that. I don't know if they ever touch on that part of it, but just like being an immigrant, being a refugee, I don't know if Asa is Muslim, but I feel like in America it doesn't matter if she's Muslim, if she's Christian, or if she's Jewish. You get lumped into the same basket no matter what. Just like her lived experience, that's got to be very tough. And I feel like, I've said this before talking about this show, but like for me being like very curious, I'm always very curious to learn about the other way people live. And I feel like if you watch this show, and you would definitely be like, oh, these people are just like me. Granted, they have different ceremonies, maybe they eat different style of food, but their like emotions, their desires, the way that they view things are very similar to me, a girl who grew up in the suburbs of Kentucky. You know what I mean? I would say that, a lot of things about us are different, but the same. And that's the whole point. And I feel like if people would just even take a couple of hours and just watch this show and realize these people are very similar to me, I think, and it's not just them, but it's like all the people in America, that are immigrants. I mean, almost everybody who's here it wasn't from here. Only, Native Americans are from here, Indigenous Americans. So we're all kind of like emotionally homeless. You know what I mean? if that's the way of it. And a lot of people are refugees. I don't know. I just feel like if people would use their listening ears and learn, I think a lot of the stuff that's happening right now could have been avoided. I don't know. But again, our billionaire overlords don't want us to know. They just want to be able to blame people instead of us all coming together and realizing that it's actually their fault. So she has a love-hate relationship with Persians in LA because they're so materialistic, and they do not live a soulful life. So Asa's big thing is about how different she is than the rest of the Persian community. And her new song, Tehrangelis, is a way to expand into the commercialness of life. She's not sure about how she feels about it because this is going to be like a commercial venture to make money, and the whole point of the song is about anti-making money. So yeah, kind of a conundrum you got there. So now we meet Sammy, and he's meeting Reza. He's known him since high school as well. Sammy is very sure of himself. Or no, I'm sorry. He thinks Reza is very sure of himself. And he's the only guy to have a rapist mustache and think it's cool. Now, this is quoting, I'm not saying this. So I will say one big thing about Reza is he does have like this large full mustache. Now, I personally feel like, do you remember in the teens, there was like a very hipster mustache moment and people would get like tattoos of a mustache on their finger and then I personally feel, and I felt this way when this was going through, that this was based on Reza's mustache, and I'm not even joking. I think for whatever reason, Reza's mustache is so luxurious, he created a mustache movement. So we learn that Sammy is a real estate developer, and success is very important to him, especially as an Iranian Jew. He is saying this. Not me. I'm not saying that success is important being Jewish. He's saying this, okay? I'm just repeating him. He says in Iran, their life was very good, but they did not get to take their wealth with them. They just got the fuck out. And Sammy says that he's showing Reza and one of Reza's clients a property, and he's like, he really needs to sell this property because his business partner is getting divorced. And if he doesn't sell before they get a divorce, it's going to be like tied up in the divorce. And he's like, I'm not a tough negotiator when I'm working with friends. And then Reza come on and says, Sammy would chisel his mom for a nickel. He never, he's never going to give me a deal on this. So now we go back over to MJ's, and she's having like a little brunch, and Vida comes over. Now Vida is MJ's mom, and we'll meet a lot about Vida. Vida is kind of like the worst mother. There's a lot of like Bravo and housewife moms that are really terrible, and it will make you think, oh, I should call my mom and thank her for not being like this, because this woman is MJ's first op. Like, she criticizes MJ. So I do not know how MJ has a shred of self-confidence left. This woman is terrible. MJ tells us that she's intimidated by her mother, who criticizes everything. I mean everything. So Sammy comes over. They're all going to have like a little brunch, and he brings flowers for Vida. And MJ says, you know, Persian moms love to talk shit. They're the champions of talking shit. And Vida and Sammy are making fun of what MJ's wearing. And then they go over to Sammy's dating life. And MJ says Sammy will not date a girl that he's not having sex with. So they're all like, all these people are single, by the way, and they're all like looking for love. And Vida tells him that Jewish girls and Armenian girls get fat and wear flip-flops as soon as they get married. And that not to rush into marriage because he's going to lose all of his money when he gets a divorce. So, also I will say that these people are very steeped in patriarchy, and so they have a lot of negative things to say about women in general. Like, very much women are objects. Like, oh, once you marry a woman, she's only out for your money, which is like very clear that is actually what Gigi is saying. She's not looking for love. She's wanting a man who can keep up with the lifestyle that her dad pays for, but also she's not willing to cook or clean. And do anything of like what a typical housewife would do. So that means that she's looking for someone who's very wealthy that can just pay for a house cleaner and a cook, right? Or they can go out to eat all the time or whatever it is. So there's that, but they're also just very much steeped in extreme misogyny and the patriarchy. And we just have to accept that is where they are and just keep it moving without getting too upset about it. MJ tells us that her parents' marriage started to unravel when she was 6 years old. And the reason that Vida is so bitter is because she's always been disappointed by her own relationships. So that's why she's so bitter and critical. Sammy says that the reason Vida is so hard on MJ, it has to do with MJ not being married. Now, these people are all not Gigi is around 30, but everybody else is in their mid to late 30s. So especially for the women, it's like we need to start having babies. And I'm not saying that you have to have a baby by any age. Please understand, I'm not saying that you need to have a baby by 35 or you need to have a baby by 40. I'm just saying it is more difficult to get pregnant, carry a baby to term. Everything just becomes more difficult the older you get. There's just more health complications, and that's just biologically the truth. And I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not saying it's wrong, and I'm not saying you have to do anything. Please understand that you live your life the way that you want to, and I will fully support that. But I'm just saying, like, the physical reality is it's much more difficult to have baby later in life. And it's not that it's impossible, it's just more difficult. Understand me. So now we move over to Gigi, and she is shopping because they are going out to dinner. And she says looking good is very important to her, and not repeating outfits. That she used to carry a calendar with her, and she would write down what she wore so that she would never repeat an outfit. And what I say to that is I wear the same thing every single day, so I'm always repeating an outfit. Her dad funds her lifestyle. And Asa comes in and tells us when you go to a Persian party, there's 10 girls that will have the same pair of expensive shoes on, like Louboutin. And she says, but money doesn't buy you style. Which Asa's whole thing is just being counterculture to the Persian culture. MJ says it's very important that you look good because if you look good, you're confident. And that, no, wait, I'm sorry. Mike says this. Excuse me. Oh my God. Mike says it's very important that you look good because if you look good, you're confident. And that's how you get hot women. Oh my God. I can't. You know when I said I needed something that was like a light, this is what I'm talking about. These people, it doesn't matter. They just want to go shopping and work out and take steroids so they can get hot women. That's like the whole goal in life is just to attain money so that they can get hot people. And that's it. And I love that. So now they're all going out to dinner with some friends. There's also, so it's all the people that we've already been introduced to, plus a couple other people that are like always kind of around. And it leads me to wonder if they were supposed to be on the show and just nothing interesting was happening with them or something. So they're all going out to dinner. And Reza says that, oh, thank God Asa looks good tonight. She usually dresses like a belly dancer and it embarrasses him. Then Sammy arrives and he makes Mike was sitting like at the head of the table and he makes Mike get up and he's like, no, you don't sit here. I sit here at the head of the table, which is weird. That's a weird thing to do. And, MJ gets there, and so they're all talking, and they're talking about how Persian Jews won't marry Persian Muslims. And I guess Mike and Gigi are flirting. So Gigi is a Muslim, and Mike is Jewish. And MJ says she doesn't know what's going on between Mike and Gigi, but Mike is not interested in her, will not be interested in anything long-term with Gigi because she's Muslim. So it's very interesting. I mean, this is just like such an interesting look in just first half of the show. Interesting look into a whole different culture of like me, just white American Christian, girl, like not ever being exposed to really much of any of this. You know what I'm saying? So they're all laughing and joking and getting excited because Sammy is having a pool party the next day. And apparently Sammy has incredible parties. And then Asa makes some kind of comment about somebody's outfit being from H&M. And she wasn't necessarily directing this to Gigi, but Gigi gets really pissed. And she's like, I was wearing a Diane von Furstenberg dress and Louboutin shoes. So she starts going off at her at the table, talking about, I don't know exactly, but she's just like screaming at Asa, and Asa's like, are you okay? Like, what's your problem? Do you have something against me? And Gigi says, yes, we know you're ghetto, which is, I don't know, such a weird, their problem with Asa isn't that she's ghetto. It's that she's not following the societal norms of dressing and acting like them and caring about her appearance. She's an artist, and we all know someone who's like an artist, and they, they're meditating under a new moon and they're wearing like eccentric outfits. To me, that's not ghetto. You know what I mean? So for her, and this is not the last time that Gigi does this. She does it again in the next episode. And I've only watched the first 2 episodes so far, but I'm just like, it struck me as just like weird. Like when she said it the first time, I'm like, okay. But then when she said it the second time, I'm like, I would never describe Asa as ghetto. She's more like eccentric. She's like, she reminded me of like that, like an older woman who just like likes to wear caftans, and she's not an older woman, but you know what I'm saying? Just like likes to wear caftans, and she paints, and she knows like all of these, like she used to know Andy Warhol, and you know what I mean? Or like model for him or something. And just like has lives this like crazy lifestyle, and they're just like so eccentric. She's like that, but younger. So Asa says, what's ghetto to you? Because my daddy doesn't bankroll my life. And then everybody at the whole table stops as if she said something like, and like the worst thing, I can't even think of anything. And Reza says, Asa crossed a line that you do not cross in our crew. Families are off limits. She's not talking bad about Gigi's family. She's saying Gigi doesn't work and her dad pays for her whole life. So Gigi goes nuts and she's like, if you ever mention any member of my family and I in a conversation again, we're going to have a problem. And Asa's like, what are you talking about? And Gigi's like, you mentioned my father. Do it again and we're going to have a problem. And Asa's like, I'm not scared of you, Golnessa. And Gigi says, I'm not asking you to be scared of me because I'm not threatening you. I don't threaten. I take action. If you have something to say, shut it. Shut it off. Shut your face. Like at a dinner table, in the way everybody is like, oh no, you were fine. Asa was out of line. What do you mean Asa was out of line? I feel like I'm in the upside down. No, absolutely not. So that's dinner. And the next day is Saturday. And Mike has a meeting. He's into commercial real estate, leasing and sales of commercial retail. He says Persians are good at business. And he's in a meeting with all white dudes and they all have extremely like red faces. And I don't know if it's just the coloring, like the color grading of the film, or if these people are, it just, whenever somebody has like a really, really red face like that, it just makes me think that they're alcoholics. Because why are all the capillaries in your face broken? Or maybe they just got back from skiing. Like, I mean, it's weird red. So Mike tells us that his business was originally in Las Vegas and he was selling millions and he was like living this really lavish lifestyle and just like living it up. And then the, housing crisis or whatever it was. So he says the bottom fell out, and when all that collapsed, he was in a dark place and it was a very humbling experience. And so he decided to move back to LA and just like restart everything. His mom calls while he's in this meeting and he takes it on speakerphone, which is crazy. And then we see a scene where MJ goes wedding dress shopping with her friend who's getting married, and she just has a lot of really negative stuff to say about marriage. And she's like, getting married is just the first step in your divorce. And it's like, your best friend is getting married. Like, you're the maid of honor. Maybe just don't say this stuff. Maybe just don't say this stuff like in front of your girlfriend. Maybe just save that for everybody else. Okay, so now we go to the pool party. And when I tell you that there's probably 50 people at this guy's house for a pool party. So Reza is bringing his client to Sammy's pool party. He's explaining the party to them. And he's like, his client's a white guy. So he's like, this is not like a regular pool party that you're thinking about, because no one gets in the pool. It's just like an excuse to have a party in the middle of the day. But there's going to be a lot of food and gold diggers. It's just like, if your whole culture is about making money and having stuff, but yet you get mad when people are seeking out relationships with people who have a lot of money, I just don't understand it. And that's where the misogyny comes in, because if you're, it's like people want this traditional, they want this traditional woman, but then they get upset when the woman reciprocates and wants to also be like the traditional wife, meaning they don't have to work. I don't think that's necessarily a gold digger. Why would I want to not work with someone who's poor? No, if I'm going to be a traditional wife, I'm going to pick someone who has money. Like that. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. But Reza tells us that Sammy's parties are crazy. He also says it's difficult to be gay in the Persian community. And so he tells a story about how his mom had pulled him aside, sat him down and said, "Are you gay?" And he had to make a split-second decision. Do I tell her right now, or do I keep this a secret for the rest of my life? So he told her, and he said that she was hysterical for 5 minutes. And then she got over it and said, "I love you and I will always support you." Which honestly is actually very beautiful, especially coming from a culture that is not very open to gay and lesbian lifestyles. So it was a very beautiful moment, and his story of it was very nice. But first person he chose was MJ. So he is very out gay man Persian man. So it's kind of a big deal. Another reason why Reza is like so important in the Bravo community, because that was probably really the first time anybody had ever seen like an out gay Persian man on TV who was just like living his life out loud and not ashamed, you know? MJ tells us that image is everything in their community. So she would spend more money on a handbag than her rent because more people would see that. They're all getting ready for the party, and Gigi comes over with a bunch of her friends and a glam squad for them to all get ready over at MJ. And MJ says nobody cuts corners on beauty. Gigi's starting to be nervous about who's going to be there because she expects Mike to have invited a bunch of catty women. So it's very clear that Gigi has a crush on Mike. She's been flirting with him basically this entire episode. And she wants Mike to have all his attention on her and not a bunch of women that he's going to bring, right? Okay, so now we get to Sammy's party. He says, Sammy says he hates being alone and bored, so he loves to throw parties all the time, which is kind of like, it's kind of sad, but also like maybe if you found a wife, at least you wouldn't be alone anymore. I can't say that you wouldn't be bored. Okay, this is where the people start arriving, and like it is a huge party. And then Sammy's like, I have a huge surprise for everyone. Long story short, he has hired a large tiger. It's just like in his yard. Like, why? What's the point of that? Reza arrives and he's like obsessed with the tiger. He keeps going over to the tiger. I would honestly probably leave, because one of the things I am so afraid of is just like wild animals getting out. Of course, Mike brought a girl with him, and he says it's a Latin woman. He loves Latin women. And Reza says she looks like she came from a mail order catalog. I'm starting. These people are not very nice. Asa says she's excited to see Sammy, but wasn't super excited about going to the pool party because these are the types of parties she avoided in high school. And I'm thinking, babe, I don't think you were invited to any of these parties in high school. And that's not a dig at her or anything, but she always just acts like she's too good for like everything else. And that's why people don't like you, because of your attitude. Let's be honest. You were not cool enough to probably go to these parties because, we all know this type of person, this eccentric artist who thinks that they're too good for everyone else. And that makes people not like you. That's just really the end of it. Okay. So they're arriving and everybody is talking about Asa because they don't like her outfit. Now, what Asa was wearing, I had no problem. I did not understand why everybody was making fun of her. Reza says everyone in this group gets along really well because we're all cut from the same cloth, except Asa, who was cut from a loincloth. And Gigi says, I'm not going to get into Asa's style. I don't know if she's trying to be different or put on a show or what. They're literally all talking about, I think she looks cute. She has like a shorter dress on, and it's like a dress, and then she has this big gold belt, but I'm like, I thought you guys love gold. Like, what is happening? But they're all talking about her. And then Asa tells us, Sammy is my boy, but it's not cute when you're in your late 30s and you're acting like a playboy with all these young women always around. So they're all talking, they're chatting. We learned that Reza's birthday is coming up, and so they're all going to go to Vegas. They're all going to have his birthday party in Vegas, and Gigi is actually really nervous because, of course, they invited everyone because it's a cast trip, right? Gigi is nervous because she does not get along with Asa, but it's about Reza and his birthday, and she says, I want to look like a bad person if I speak my mind all the time. You mean by being a bitch? Like, of course you're going to look like a bad person because you're acting like a bad person. And this is where Reza is like, no, at the dinner the other night, you were acting like such a lady. You could have not been more diplomatic and elegant. What are you talking about? She's literally threatening violence against us. That's not diplomatic or ladylike at all. I mean, this shit is so crazy. And then Gigi gets mad about the fact that Mike has brought a woman to this pool party. And of course, this woman is wearing a bikini and she is getting in the pool. There are a couple people in the pool. And Gigi's like, this is not an LA bikini. It's a Vegas bikini. It's like a Vegas pool party, if you know the difference. What do you mean, babe? Because next week you're at a Vegas pool party. So then she starts going around and asking people if this girl is appropriately dressed for a house party. She has on a bikini. Like, what did you want her to wear? What did you want her to wear? A one piece? Did you want her to come in with just a caftan? And Mike is like, stop hating on her just because she's my date. She has a banging body and you're just jealous. And Gigi's like, yeah, we're all jealous of you. And Mike's like, she's not hating on you. I showed her a picture of you earlier and she said you were hot. And so then now they're starting to go back and they're yelling and causing a scene. And Reza's like, oh, Gigi's super jealous. And Gigi goes, Mike is like a brother to me. But if you're going to start yelling at me, I'm going to get nasty. And she's like, do you want to do this somewhere else? I'm not talking shit to you and all these people. And Mike's like, whatever. And then he just like jumps in the pool and he goes to this girl and they're basically like humping in the pool. It's actually, that part was not great. But that's the end of the episode. So here's what we learned so far. These people care a lot about what they look like, the labels that they wear. They like to just spend a lot of money on everything. They like to have gold. And it's like their appearance is very important to them. And it's like culturally important to them. Okay. Asa is above it all. And it pisses everybody else off that she's above it all. And these people all basically know each other from back in the day. So they've been friends for decades at this point. So that is that. We will talk about the next episode in the next one. And thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you later. Bye.